Hi, good evening. Sridhar, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, I'm not on mute anymore.
Ah. Hi, Ashok.
Hi.
Hi. How are things in Bombay, Sridhar?
Bombay, things are quite. There is a lot of concern as to what's going to happen. Because there is worry that the local government might extend it, because I think the PM has left it to the state governments.
Okay.
Bombay Pune belt is pretty bad. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Okay. Cases seem to have gone up significantly, no? The cases have gone up significantly there.
Yeah, in Maharashtra, yes.
Yeah.
Bombay, especially some localities. So our colony is also quite strict.
Right.
Okay. So as of now, no servants are allowed.
Okay.
Unless there is a servant who's been living in the house of the tenant or the owner.
Okay.
So servants, drivers are not allowed. So we managed all along, but now it is, I think, beginning to stress out a little bit.
Yeah, correct.
Cleaning the house itself is a pretty big thing, yeah.
Right.
So I quite enjoy washing the vessels, but it's quite nice. Because that's because you see instant results, no? So the
Yeah.
So I think that is our wanting to get immediate results is the stuff there, you know. After being a scout, I think after so many years, this is the first time I'm doing it. I'm washing vessels 3 times a day.
Wow.
So anytime I see something in the kitchen, I say the kitchen sink is kar denge abhi. No procrastination. But it's also been interesting. I've been writing a lot.
Okay.
You know, so and I've been writing on LinkedIn.
Right.
I'm getting some damn good inquiries.
Okay.
I don't ask for business, okay? I write stuff and publish articles and all that. But it's got me some damn good mileage. There are guys who written and saying, can we kind of stuff.
Nice.
Because what's happened is that my entire business is washed off.
Okay.
The entire business is based on workshops.
Correct.
I don't see workshops happening for the next 2-3 years.
It's true.
You know, no 5-star hotel stuff and this, that. So I think everything will become online. Now that people are used to online, they'll say, we might as well finish it here.
Yeah, it's true.
So I have to rejig my stuff, rework it. All the toolkits I have and all that, I'll have to figure out what to do.
Good. Hi, Nirja.
Hi.
Hi, Raghu.
Hi. Oh.
Just waiting for a couple more people. Start in the next 2 minutes. I see a lot of people coming in. Okay.
Charger. It's very bad. Very bad.
Shireen, any more people in the waiting room, or can we start? The rest of them can join in.
Yeah. Nobody in the waiting room. Maybe when they come in, I will let them.
You let me then, right? Okay, fine. Sure. Great. Good evening. It's that time of the week again. When we all get to...
Making it sound like bonus time.
I know. Yeah, we just all get together and have a great time.
Yeah.
We have lots of fun. We have very interesting conversations, deeply reflective, playful, serious, but highly, highly introspective conversations. So I'm happy to welcome all of you back to this webinar. Actually, I shouldn't be saying webinar. We've consciously said
Correct.
It's a contemplative dialogue, right? So happy to have all of you back. For those of you who've been with us the last two webinars, welcome back. There are some people who have joined us for the first time as well. Happy to have you here. Just for the benefit of some of the new people, this is a third in the webinar series that we've been doing. We've been focusing largely around women and leadership, the kind of challenges that women face in organizations. The first two conversations were around stereotypes. The second was around the idea of the glass ceiling. And we had a lot of very, very interesting discussions. All the recordings of both of these webinars are there on YouTube. We'll send you the links to the rest of the two webinars after this conversation and sometime tomorrow. Please do go and check it out. Very interesting conversations. Like I said, my name is Vivek. For some of the new people who've joined in, I'm part of the Quinergy leadership team, which has been bringing you these webinars. Happy to introduce our two panelists for the last two webinars and for this as well. Neerja Ganesh and Raghu Ananthanarayanan. Neerja comes in with about 25 years experience in the IT industry. She's been basically a mentor for a lot of the women leaders. And happy to have her here. And she's been very insightful, and she's been sharing a lot of experiences that she's had in her own growth as a leader. Welcome, Neerja.
Thank you so much, Vivek.
Yeah. Raghu, I'm assuming most of you all would have seen his website or seen videos of Raghu, seen the work that Raghu does. Let me just put it, Raghu, and I know I'm repeating it for a lot of this, but I can't find a better way to explain what Raghu does. He just works with people to get the best out of them. And that's, in his conversations, I saw Sridhar clapping Raghu.
Thanks, Sridhar.
Helping you be the best that you can be. And that's been our under Raghu's mentorship, Quinergy has been focusing on doing that for quite some time now. Right? So this webinar, this conversation, and please remind me next time I use webinar that
Correct.
not what I'm using. Right? So this contemplative conversation, we've structured a little differently right now. We've had several questions which have come, and we also realize we've not done justice to a lot of questions which have come. So this conversation is going to be a little different in structure. We're not going to get into breakout rooms. We're going to invite our participants to ask questions around the theme that they'd like to explore. Whoever asks those questions, we'd invite 4 more participants to join that. And we have a set of 5 people basically having a dialogue with Neerja and Raghu. Right? The rest of y'all, we will have to mute you because otherwise there won't be any depth to the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, we will be happy to listen to your reflections of any other residual questions that you might have. But the focus, we hope to cover at least 4 to 5 such themes during the course of the conversation. Feel free to write in if you have something which is pressing and you'd like to state it. Please do send in a private chat to me and I'll take a look at it and we'll see how we can weave that in. Right? So that's going to be the structure of today's conversation. Happy to start it off. We had a couple of questions that Satish had, and I thought it's a very interesting question to start off with. So Satish, if you can, are you there, Satish? I can't see you.
Yes.
Yeah. So Satish, what we will do is if you can, state your question, Then we will see from the rest of the participants who else, along with Satish, can have the conversation with Raghu and Neerja, and then we'll take it from there. Satish.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Vivek.
Yeah.
So my question was, this was being there from the last session, Raghu. The thing of how to differentiate between the dream and fantasy. From the last session, I've been thinking about it, and a couple of my friends who also attended it, we've been talking about it. So we understood the basic of what you told us, the dream and fantasy. But then when I think about myself, how do I go deeper into it? Somewhere I'm also there in the middle management now, and as what you told last time. Now I'm on the path of to find out what I should do next. Though I know I'm doing something, but is that the right thing, or what should I do next? And what is the dream basically that I'm having for myself? So any help to navigate that whole thing? So that's what I wanted to ask.
Thanks, Satish. Anybody else would like to have similar questions or similar streams of thoughts? Yes, Sai. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I also relate to that question, and possibly I'm in the same phase of life where, and I'm in a profession where creativity is it's the driving force. So, sort of your fantasies and dreams sort of have a meeting point. You visualize literally a lot of things. So I would also like to understand, how do you really convert certain questions which you've worked with all your life? You've converted some of them, especially when you're in a creative field where you're working with people who some of them you're able to work through, but some of them you're not able to realize. I would also like to have a discussion around that.
Sure, great. Anybody else? And then we can start the dialogue. Anybody else would like to join in this stream? Good. So let's start. Raghu, Neerja, we have two people. Yeah. Let's start off. I think we have Satish and Sai Kotai, and we can start off with this conversation.
So I'll just kind of maybe give my story, and maybe there'll be some elements that may come. So as Vivek was introducing, right, 25 years of IT. That was defining me as an individual, as a professional in the beginning of my career, and 25 is a very long time. And then in the last 3 years, it's been 3 years, I've done varied things. One of the things is that people probably know me for what I did in the last 3 years than the 25 years that went by. But how did the transition happen? While we say that, yes, you need to follow your passions, you need to have a goal, and you can kind of call it dreams, and you have to kind of, how does one work towards achieving those dreams, which is perfectly fine. But I think the point is that you need to act on whatever you wish to do. Dreaming is good, and we all have dreams. But what is the action that you take? And it can be very, very small. So let me tell you, when in 2016, I was still working in an IT company, and they had asked me to put out a recommendation to hire women on a career break. And I said, what's the big deal about it? Because I have never taken a break in my career, right? 25 years nonstop. And when they said, hire a woman on a career break and put out a recommendation, I said, what is there? I mean, you hire a woman, you hire a man, you hire a woman on a career break, do the usual things. But when I did the research is when I realized that there is a problem, okay? And And then because I'd done the research, I was signed up on certain portals because that's when I realized that this is such a big problem that certain portals have come up which have only women on a career break as their users, and companies who post on those portals are open to hiring women on a career break. Only such companies can come and put things. So I was registered on one such portal and I got invited to a conference. And I usually would not step out on a Saturday to do anything beyond because Friday you're working. Somebody needs to mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can Shireen or Vinod, can you just look after this? Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't go out on Saturdays to anything, outside of home, outside of the regular work. But it was a Saturday. It was a full day conference. I was not on a break. I was not considering taking a career break. But I said, let me just see, what happens here. And when I heard the women at that conference, I realized there's a big problem. And I told myself, I need to do something about it. I didn't know what I could do. You are in a company for 25 years. You have no, knowledge of how things work outside that ecosystem. Here you have all, people that you can call. You can say, I need this, and stuff gets done for you. But in my mind, it was very clear I have to do something about it. So I started. What was my first action? I said, some of the CVs that I got from the conference, I said, I will do something about this. So I sent it out within my company. I spoke to some people and I followed it up to death to say, hey, can you at least give this person an interview? That's how I started. And then because it is there in your mind that you need to do something about it, suddenly things start appearing. You may feel that universe is conspiring or, some other terminology, right? Law of attraction and all of that. But I think you start seeing a bit more because that's what is always playing on your mind. And I saw this portal called Jobs for Her, who had advertised for the need for ambassadors. Ambassadors are people who speak about this portal, women on a career break and what they do, but via the portal to help such women. Again, I was not on a break. I was not thinking of taking a break because usually ambassadors are people who have taken a break. I said, let me be an ambassador. I want to do something, maybe this is the way. And that journey from an ambassador, because of the difference I could bring in, I was much senior than all these girls who were looking out to restart. I could give them some tips and tricks. Jobs for Her watched me doing all of that. They said, why don't you become a mentor on our portal? And from there, I kind of volunteered for a few things. Eventually, the role of heading the Jobs for Her Foundation came by. So I think that action, however small it is, I have seen so many of my friends talk about, we have to do this, we want to do this, we'll retire by 40, 50, and then we will do this. That then we will do will never happen. Okay, it has to happen today. And it can happen in very small, things. And that small can become big. So in the last 3 years, I think I have, created such a big brand about myself saying this is a woman who will go and help any other woman as long as, careers are concerned. People know about me more than what I was known in the last 25 years. And what I have been able to accomplish has been hugely satisfying. Just using somebody else's platform. So that's another thing, right? People think, okay, we should start our own platform. We should scale it up. We should be able to impact 100,000 people. Yes, it's good. You must have this vision, especially if you're an entrepreneur. But start. That's all I will say. The minute you start, it will take you to the next steps. Automatically, things will, unfold and you will be working towards your dream. And that's my bit to that question.
Neeraj, I have a follow-up question with respect to your response. No, you had, from what I understood, that you had a relatively stable career in IT. It laid the foundation for your identity. You had perspective, and then you reached a point where you could talk about ideas. I'll get a little personal here, but in life, for example,
can you just be a little louder? Maybe bring the mic a little closer.
Okay. For a lot of us, I belong to the Gen X. Be our generation where we also wanted to break norms. At the same time, we were brought up with certain values. So there was this, there was this dichotomy that you had to deal with. So what happens with respect to the dream and the reality is, on the one hand, you want to parallelly sort of pursue what you want to be. which may have a conflict. For example, it could be cinema, it could be, music in a certain way, which is not very traditional, and then on the other hand, I was given the responsibility at the age of 18 to take care of my family, simply because I was very prudent when it came to handling finances. So the thing is, there is a reality you have to deal with, and somehow what happens is, although you are very strong on other aspects, you sort of suppress that side of you. Okay, and parts of you start realizing your dreams in your work, but there is always this aspect of you which you're not able to. So it's sort of gendered. What I'm trying to say is that you're trying to break a norm. You feel that by taking on responsibility and standing up, there is that mask you can wear, and then you can sort of voice out that aspect of yourself. But at the same time, when you look deep within, you've really not been who you are. It's just that circumstances have shaped you. So I don't know. I've been able to capture what I'm thinking, but this is what is the dilemma between converting so-called dreams to reality as a gendered experience, right? So how do you really look at that? Because it's not a skill. You may have possibly problem-solving skills, or you may be a little driven, and and that helps you do well in your professional life. But then there is a side to you which you're not really able to realize because you take on a responsibility. So how do you really work on these aspects?
So if I were to understand your question correctly, there is this huge responsibility that one needs to undertake, because there is the engine has to keep running, right? The home has to run and everything has to run. You just can't aspire for those things and say that, okay, I'm not going to do anything else. But that's not what I said. Take a small action also is good enough. There are two reasons why people don't take those small actions. One is they say, okay, how will it even help the larger picture that I want to paint and draw and visualize. But my point is, do it. Because while it sounds cliche, it's small drops of water from the ocean, it will come. And it is a large life, long life. You don't worry about that. It will come. And at some point in time, seamlessly, it will transition to kind of help your engine also keep running. I do agree that I had a great career, 25 years. And so that definitely helped me, in terms of taking certain decisions. It's okay to quit my job. It's okay to kind of, try out a few things and all of that. But that also, again, is a question. I was able to do it after 25 years. There are many who are not able to do it 30, 35 years also, because one is not able to define how much money do I need, and who knows what will happen in the future, etc. Right? So for that, I think that even that small bit is good enough, because you're still pursuing that path. You have to do this because there is a compelling need for you to keep that day job going. But on the side, ensure every day, to whatever extent, kind of keep following that. That's what I would say. The second point I'm understanding is that it's probably not the norm what you're trying to do, and hence you may not get ample support, and you will probably be asked, why are you even doing this? You would rather focus that energy also on your day job, and you better, do that better. The answer is always, people will keep saying, this is what you want to do. So I think a little bit of, ignoring the noise and, kind of having resilience and moving on is required, because at some point in time, people will realize what it has done for you. May not be monetarily, may not be in other ways, but as an individual, as a complete person, I think that really will enhance, and, it will show. Raghu, anything that you would want to say to this?
Oh, this is a very interesting question. See, there are 2-3 things that are being talked about here. Let me just start with the dream and fantasy. What is the difference between a dream and a fantasy? No? A fantasy is more like a daydream. And you're often, in a fantasy, you're thinking about what you will become. I'll do this, and all that. There's a famous story of this little girl who's sitting with a lot of pots. And then she says, you know what, I'm going to sell these pots and I'm going to buy, many more pots. Then I'm going to put up a shop and so on and so forth. And then she says, I'm going to become such a famous person that the Yuvraj will come looking for me and he will say, will you marry me? And I'm going to say no. And she kicks all her pots. Right? So a fantasy is almost always externally referred to. And unfortunately, most of our management books call this a dream. Right? Whereas a dream is a much deeper inner call where it doesn't tell you what the external consequences are going to be. It's a burning desire to be somebody, to do something, not in external terms, but in your own eyes.
Right.
So when I heard you talking, Neerja, for example, what I'm hearing you say is, look, I didn't want to just be a person who was doing a great job. There's something inside me that said, I want to be a person who's helping other people. Now, what is the consequence of this would not have touched you at that point at all.
Right.
Just this burning inner feeling that I can do this and I should do this. And there's a conviction around a dream. So a dream usually has 2 or 3 components. Na? One, it has a very strong ability to touch the deepest core of what you're capable of. A dream always touches what you really are capable of, right? The second thing it does is it creates a kind of an urgency to act on it, which is what you're suggesting, do something, right? It creates an urgency to act on it. Third, it does not concern itself very much with consequences, right? But there's another very interesting thing that happens, which you talked about. When I have a real dream, I seem to be able to look at the world around me differently. It actually rewires my brain where I will start seeing things and interpreting things differently, which is what you called, the universe seems to conspire. Universe is not conspiring. Yeah, your brain has got rewired because you really want to do this.
Right.
And something in you makes you realize that this is an opportunity for me to. So there's a connection that happens between an external thing and an internal deep wish, right? This is the key difference between a dream and a fantasy, right? The second thing is the form in which your dream comes true will not be the form that your fantasy takes of it. Yeah, when I left college, for example, I wanted to be an artist, right? And for people who know, I used to have a lot of conversations with Panikkar from Cholamandal, right? I was about to join Cholamandal. And then there was a disaster in the family, right? Our business collapsed, all kinds of things. Yeah, similar to what Sai is saying, I had to go and take responsibility. So what happens to the artist in me, right? I have not painted anything since I left college. Okay, and I've won art competitions when I was in engineering with people who were studying art. So I was quite talented, let's say, at that point. But this part of me, which is the artist, shows through in everything I do. Whether I'm doing a training program or I'm doing something else or whatever, this aesthetic thing inside has to find expression, right? And when I was really in a fix about what to do, I went and met Panikkar, and Panikkar said, don't worry, painting doesn't make you an artist, right? So the dream is something that defines you from inside in a certain way. Fantasy is often a daydream. It comes up because you're comparing. Yeah, it's the whole process the brain goes through in a fantasy is very, very different from the way the psyche makes shifts when you touch your dream. Yeah, sooner or later, it will unfold.
Very true.
The only problem is you'll have to trust it and say, okay, this is there, I'm going to nurture it. And you'll keep doing something. If you really touch it, there's no way you cannot act on it. Yeah, the problem in organizations is you confuse it with organizational growth. The dream is I should be a CEO. Yeah, but the reality is the dreams will tell you who you can be. You know, what kind of a person will I be? You can be a CEO and be a horrible person. And quite often people get there for all kinds of reasons which don't have anything to do with intrinsic worth.
Sridhar wanting to say something. Vivek?
Sorry, yeah. Satish, you had a follow-up? Anything else that you?
No, I was just reflecting, Raghu and Nirja, how to find that dream itself is a question, but still, yeah, it's a process. It will go on. So I'll hold on to that.
No, you don't go looking for it like that, Satish. You just keep quiet and listen to yourself deeply, and it will tell you.
Yeah.
The only thing is you shouldn't believe any pop psychology book.
Yeah. Understood.
Sridhar, sorry. You're on mute, Sridhar.
Hey, Vivek, I want to say something.
Yeah, Pradeep.
Yeah, I think Raghu said a very important point of it coming from itself. And I think for me also, many big changes that I've made have come from myself. I think for me, what's also helped is finding props in nature. A tree, a lake, something like that also stimulates a thought. So I guess different people get different energies from different places. But clearly, I totally agree with Raghu. It has to come from within.
Sure.
Sorry, even the tree has to trigger something inside you. The tree becomes a symbol of something inside.
True, totally.
Sridhar, you're going to say something.
Yeah, this is very interesting in terms of the way people are looking at this. I have been in the advertising industry. I used to work for an advertising agency called Ogilvy and Mather. I worked there for 25 long years. I had a fantastic career. I was sort of board of the company, and in the year 2000, the bug bit me. Right. One day I got up and said, if I'm sticking around this company in 8 years' time, I have to retire. 58 was the retirement age. And I don't believe in retirement. I believe retirement is a man-made concept. It's crazy and it's not, it doesn't make any sense. And I said, I don't want to retire. But if I stayed in the company, I would have had to retire. So I said, I'll beat retirement. I'll quit the company now. Okay. Now, at that time, I wasn't very clear what I was going to do. I had a chat with my wife and I said, I want to do something like this. So we had a very clear this thing. And she said, how long can we pull on with no income if there was no income for 2 years? Right? She said, curd rice guaranteed for 2 years. Okay. Then I was very clear about what I did not want to do. I did not want to be in advertising because I can't compete with the best company I worked in. I also wanted to do something where there was nobody else in the space. Then I realized that the whole world all the time was talking about ideas, creativity, innovation, etc. And they didn't know what they were talking about. So I saw that that was a fantastic space to be in, right? And I also said to myself, I didn't want the burden of building an organization. And I said it'd be a one-man show. So it'd be a two-person show, just my wife and myself. And we said, okay, I don't want to be driving in the city of Bombay thinking about things, and that will be a disaster. So I said, we'll have a driver, right? Then we'll have a part-time accountant, whatever it is. But entire work that I do is to help people think differently, right? And then I realized it's all very fancy to say this. We have to give them tools and techniques to do that. Then I went and created a toolkit for thinking, right? Now, the whole thing that happens here is that your dream can be articulated in any which way. But my feeling is that one, you have to pursue and you have to persist. I have seen a lot of people talking a big thing about dreams. In 6 months, they quit. And that is complete disaster, right? And this is where in the first 6 months of my work, I didn't get a single piece of work which was in the arena in which I wanted to work. But a lot of work came to me in the context of direct marketing, this, that, etc. And I was not foolish enough to say, no, I won't do this because I'm into creativity. I said, it makes sense for me to be busy, right? It gave me the opportunity to go and talk to the client, do some work, and then I'll say, I can also help you in helping your people to think differently. So it gave me a foot in the door. So it was like a classic salesman thinking about, get me a foot in the door, I'll walk with the water back kind of stuff. So I think there is a thing that happened to me. I'm speaking for myself, is that at one level, there was a big dream which I wanted to chase, right? On the other side, I said that if I don't have building steps to get onto the dream, I will stay in the ground floor all the time. So I had to have a right mix of the dream and the practical ways of getting into doing that. And the third thing I realized is that you have to be able to sell. Now, I'm not using sell in a very derogatory term. You have to be able to communicate to the other person as to why they should do business with you, right? It's not about what's in it for me, it's what's in it for them. So I have to be able to explain to them that, look, if we were to do business, these are the things I see happening for you and your people, right? So once I actually cracked the dialogue, I could walk into a Hindustan Lever and get business. I could walk into a BPCL and get business because I rehearsed my line, and the line was not a paragraph. A line was a line. So I just simply said, I can help your people think differently and do better. That is my line. And this has been my line for the last 20 years. If you wake me up in my dream, I'll say the same thing, right? But one of the things, biggest ingredients to all this thing, which propels me all the time, is a certain degree of madness and passion, right? If you don't believe in it, nobody else is going to believe in it. Yeah. So my sort of summation, I think, is a dream has to be fueled by your passion and action. Otherwise, the dream will just remain as a dream.
No, I have a slightly different take on this, Sridhar.
Yeah.
It's because you touched a real dream that the passion and the drive flows out. It's not that you fuel, when you say I'm fueling the dream, you're talking about it as though the dream is outside of you, that you have to pour something into it. Every person I've met who has had a dream, the other word that you said is very important. You have to be slightly nuts. You have to be slightly mad. You have to, and this madness is like a pittam, na? In Tamil, it's a much nicer word.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a pittan, no? Something inside you will not let you rest.
Correct.
So if you didn't have this inside you, you'll put your foot inside the door and the guy will give you a lucrative thing somewhere else and you'll run behind it.
Yeah.
But if this inside compass is there, right, you'll move things so that this inner flame is fed.
Yeah.
So I believe that the touching the dream and nourishing it, believing in it, leads to everything else.
Fair. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's not the other way about.
So the fueling the dream, I used it as a turn of phrase, but I agree with your clarification. Yeah.
Correct. No, because otherwise, see, I think it's very important to differentiate between the being level stuff that happens and the doing level stuff that happens.
Right.
Having a dream is not a skill.
Right.
It's something that happens in your being. And you have to trust this. Most people, unfortunately, don't trust the intimations that come from their being. And then they go comparing. They go looking at, what will be the result if I do this, and end up in a fantasy build-up of possibilities.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to this, that during this dreaming stage, there is a grave danger of procrastination, waiting for perfection.
You just act.
Yeah, we just have to act. If there is a mistake, so
that will
be it.
happen. No, that will happen if you really have the dream.
Yeah.
I haven't, really, man. I've talked to so many people now. People who really have a dream go do something. They go and discover. They make mistakes. They get hurt. And they still don't give up their goddamn dream.
Yeah. And I had this very funny kind of feeling at that time, during that period. Anytime somebody, either my friend or my relative or my uncle, somebody said to Vijay that your husband is mad, then I thought it was an additional certification that I was on the right track.
Correct. That you have to be able to celebrate, na?
Yeah.
If you're on a fantasy trip, you'll get scared of these kind of remarks.
Yeah. So it used to be very funny. Vijay used to get a call from somebody, and then that day say, Chitapa called and he said this, and we will have a laugh, right? Her father was most worried, as my father-in-law. He would call every day and say, did your husband have a meeting today? Did he go and meet somebody? Because he was a salesman in Hindustan Lever. And salesman was, if you didn't meet a customer, you didn't have business. So your husband has to go out every day and meet. The thing that I'm saying is that when you're on this track, there are so many other forces which will actually act upon what you're trying to do. And getting distracted is going to be a disaster. We have to really remain focused. It's a very important thing if you have a dream. That's my feeling.
Thanks, Sridhar. Satish and Sai, if we can move on to the next thing, if you have any follow-up questions. Raki, you had a question? Raki, you there? You had a question?
Hello? Yeah, Vivek, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible now. Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's a network issue at my place, so I've kept the video off. So, Raghu, Nirja, I think not about dream reality, but a slightly different one in terms of the current challenges we are facing. So the question I want to pose is, if we look at, many organizations which are there in the there in the space of women leadership, everybody offers some or the other version of women leadership work, but nobody at this point in time is offering that is sexualized to the hand. Look at the women. Women employees actually move on from a standard 5 to 7, standard 9-5, 9 to 6, 7 kind of a job, 24/7 kind of, where you need to be present for the work 24/7. You need household chores without any help. You need to manage the child, depending on whichever age the child is in terms of the school demands or of the toddler, then the attention that the child needs. Plus all the other demands of the household. So in this particular scenario, the problem statement I'm dealing with, if I have to do something for women leaders to support them, help them, enable them, I feel workshop is not the right route, and training them on women leadership is not the right solution. So, the whole idea of the contempt dialogue that you're doing strikes like a solution that yes, we can have contemplative dialogue, because that helps like a problem situation, hear multiple perspectives, and each other's own go from this from sessions. But then what should these dialogues be anchored upon is a question that I'm answer for myself. And since this is that largely focuses upon women leadership, I would like to pose you. In this particular COVID scenario, where doing workshops will not be of much support, but a contemplative dialogue help themes or anchors for the dialogues.
So there was a lot of pause and break in between, but I think I kind of got the question. Let me just paraphrase it so that it's right. So I understand that you wish to do certain interventions for women and women leaders in your organization. But given the COVID-19 challenges for the women, which is additional pressure both from the office and home front, is a workshop, going to help in any way, or what is that kind of intervention that you should provide? I think that's the kind of question that you were
Yes.
right. So my answer again is going to be, I don't know, people might beat me up for this, but this is what I feel. First and foremost, I always, keep the COVID-19 away from, it's there. I'm not denying it. And each of us is dealing with it. And we probably are, dealing with it in a way, how comfortable we are. That's one aspect which helps us deal with it. Two, in terms of how strong mentally we are, that helps us deal with it. But let's keep the COVID-19 out of any discussion is what I feel. The minute, the lockdown started, we were all bombarded with webinars, and we are in one. Thankfully, we are calling it conversations and samvad. But we were bombarded with, these online interventions, and everything would be called in COVID-19. So whatever is the topic, it will end with during COVID-19 times. And I would say, why do you need to do that? Because I think the reality is that we had a life before. We have a life now, and there'll be a life later. And whatever you do will be relevant throughout. So you don't have to really say in COVID-19. That's the first thing. So if for a woman leader, you need to kind of address and say that, okay, these are 1, 2, 3. For example, how do you deal with work-life balance, integration issues? How do you deal with whatever. It is universal regardless of what era, what time, and whatever challenges you're going through. So that's the first thing I would like to say. So I have been, delivering a lot of talks in the last 2 months. I've been ultra busy. I usually take only one webinar, to speak at per week. Sometimes it is, more than one. But I have not said this is in COVID-19 times. I'm very, very clear. I do the regular stuff. How do you network? Personal branding, work-life integration, very, very regular stuff. But I might put in one slide to say, okay, something has to be different today, and that's just one aspect. It's not the entire session. So I would still say whatever your challenges are with regards to women leadership in your organization, keep focused on that, and then design the interventions according to that. Okay, so that's the first bit. The second reason for you not to think of it so much in terms of COVID is people who are feeling normal and relaxed will also start getting into a depression mode and a panic mode the minute you subject them to too much of this. Okay, so I'll give you an example. When my daughter was born, she was 8 weeks premature. Okay, of course she was in the incubator for a month, and then she came out, and we were told we should not touch her except for feeding her, cleaning her, because she was 1.8 kilos when she was born. She remained 1.8 kilos even when she came out of the incubator, so very susceptible to infection. 6 months it took for her to get to 2.5 kgs, which was the okay. After that, you could possibly treat her like a normal child, is what was told to us. So we did all of that. But me being a mother and paranoid about the fact that she happened to be premature, every time I went to the doctor with anything, she coughed, she sneezed, she fell down. For 3-4 years, I said, you know what, she's a premature baby. And the doctor said that prematurity finished at 6 months because she became 2.5 kilos and then she's normal. Get it out of your head. The other thing I can explain is, when like in our family, I'm married to someone who's got who's the youngest in a very, very large family. So his cousins are almost the age of my uncle. So when we go and meet them, especially in the early days of our marriage, the talks would be only about, okay, we are getting old. Should we get into senior citizens home? Where is our finances, retirement, diseases, illnesses? It used to be really, really depressing for me. So I would say, no, I don't want to talk to such people. Like I know we will reach 60 at some time, and we'll do whatever we have to do. But at 20, if I start living 60, then my 40 years are gone. So please do not do anything saying COVID-19 time. So let's do. Or what should we do during COVID-19 time? So that's my first, submission here. The second is, if you still want to kind of, and I would think, regular interventions, whatever you can, can be there. Maybe, make it like once a week you want to have a specific thing like mental health or, something, you could do that. But the rest has to be very regular and normal. But allow for an opportunity. If there is a woman who wants to speak about something, then allow that opportunity. So ensure your EAP centers are well, rounded and running if somebody wants to speak. Coaching interventions are available and things like that are there on a need basis for the woman. But I don't think every woman or every man and everybody, needs that. That's my, going in position for this. Raghu?
Okay. Okay. I have a slightly different take, not very different, but slightly different to start with. I'm going to bring in COVID just a moment, if you don't mind, Neerja.
Sure, please.
See, what COVID has done, and we've been, in our organization, we've been doing a lot of training programs during this last 2-3 months with large populations, right? And the last one that we did out of a group of about 60, 40 were women. Right? Now, two things have come through very sharply to us. One is that there's a difference between valuing people and telling people, I don't value you, I only value your output. Now, what's coming through to us in this COVID thing is that most organizations are telling their people, I don't value you, I only value your output. Now, how does this show up? This shows up because most people are working from home, right? And there is this great need for companionship. There's a great need to meet people who are your co-workers and things like that. So there's a great need for human contact. And I think all Indian organizations, all Indians in general, respect community first and task later. What COVID has thrown up is that we are stuck with organization design thinking where tasks come first and people come later. To us, it's becoming very clear. So the military model, the hierarchical model that we've drawn from the West is coming out in sharp relief to the way we as Indians like to deal with things. So what we've had to do in the training program is actually stop what we wanted to do and focus on just helping people feel valued as human beings, be able to speak about their tensions and so on, right? Now, the other space where this has become very clear is that because this is not very well understood and not resolved properly in most organizations, when people are working from home, right? They're moving from one room to another room mostly, right? Now, you don't realize that the way you look at yourself and the way you look at the world when you're at home is Indian. When you go to work, you somehow think you have to be in a three-piece suit. So the idea of yourself and the idea of work gets displaced from who you are as a person, and this creates a lot of tension, right? So we are seeing that people who are working from home during COVID and all of this are actually experiencing this very difficult, right? Because their natural pull is towards being human, valuing community, acting in a certain way. Whereas in their head, there's an idea of working in the organization, which is very different. And I think COVID is a great time to really review this. And I believe this very strongly. Any organization that values people first and shows that they value people, everything else will happen after that. So leadership, all of this is a consequence. And to me, we've been talking about this over and over again. The word leadership is used as though there's only one model for leadership. And we are saying that there are many models, and we are relying on the Mahabharata to say at least 5 clear models exist in India. And why are you only valuing the fighter warrior model, which is a very Western model, right? Why can't you value Nakula, who's a nurturing model, right? Why can't you value Arjuna, who's half man, half woman, right? There are many different models of leadership. So if we don't examine all of these, now, how are you valuing human beings? What is the meaning of leadership? Can you review that? Is this meaning of leadership relevant to India or not? What kind of organization should be built in India? Yeah, because much of the problems, both the COVID is just the first thing. The second thing that's going to hit us is the environmental issues, climate issues. They are the outcome of thinking of management and leadership in warrior terms. There are many other ways of looking at it, and the Indian way is to look at it, like we said earlier, as a householder. Creating an organization is a householder's responsibility to other householders. So the idea of leadership itself becomes very different. So if I look at it like this, right, I mean, every man has to understand what it means to be a householder. Every woman has to understand what it means to go out and work or whatever it is, and find a balance between the two. Yeah. So we really need to rework it, because we are holding on to the idea and a person which is agrarian, and we haven't reviewed it. And there was a clear difference in responsibility and all that in the agrarian frame. Okay, in our families, my grandfather used to take his money and give it to my grandmother. Everything inside the home was her responsibility, and she was pretty powerful. We haven't reviewed many of these, and then we get into problems. It's extreme, and this is a great time to review it. We have to review it now. Otherwise, we're going to try and recreate the world of pre-COVID or whatever it is, rather than sit back and use this context, like the 13 years of going to the forest and 1 year of Ajnatavasa and all that. No? You're not going to use the time to really review, really look at what the reality is, and start valuing human beings. That's the Indian way. Yeah, some of the most stable organizations in India are stable because they value human beings. They value relationships. Yeah. And I can't emphasize it more. No? The moment we go away from valuing people to going into valuing tasks, we'd have lost a tremendous strength, which is Indian. And we must remember, India has been in business for thousands of years. We were leaders in the GDP in the world till 1750, 1760. It's only in the last couple of 100 years that we are down. And we have business families that have been in business for ages. And many of them believe a very simple thing. You're not in business to make money. If you're a business family, you're in business to stay in business. Okay, and staying in business is a whole different idea. You don't make money now and run away. You don't extract and run away. You have to make sure that your children and your children's children are going to be in business. So if you don't create trust with your people, if you don't create trust with your customers, you can't be in business. You'll be in extraction. That doesn't work in India. You look at any, the Tatas, Birlas, Reliance, every one of these big Indian companies, the fundamental concept is trust. Trust with its people, trust with the key, whatever, stakeholder community. They actually create communities. But we continuously go looking at Western, a lot of the work I've done is actually helping people who, looked at called some foreign consultant to do something, and then people are adjusting very much to it. And then we go in and help them to reorient themselves. Yeah, I don't want to mention some of the organizations we've been in, but over and over again, all that we've done in OT in many places, including the government when I've worked, is to help people trust their Indianness. And enormous creativity comes out. The moment they trust that I, as a person, is extremely valuable, phenomenal creativity comes out. Leadership takes over in forms that you haven't envisaged. You just have to respect it and give space for it.
I think Raki's had some issues with her phone.
I know.
And she's not been able to look. Anybody else?
You should send her a recording.
Yeah, I'll do that. Any similar questions, related questions that you'd like to pursue? Yes, I'll send the recording to Raki. We'll open it up. We'll go on to the next question. Anybody else would like to have a dialogue? Any questions that you might have?
Vivek, if there's nobody, I had actually raised a question. In
Even if there's somebody, you can raise a question.
Correct.
Okay. No, I don't want to, sort of, I've already spoken once. There was one question I had raised among the two in the registration process. It's around power. A lot of times I have a challenge with the top-down structure. And
thank you.
Yeah, so where power is not distributed, and because I believe in the idea of republic even in an organization. So, and this is what has troubled me, and this is what led me to come into OD. But from a gendered perspective, and I don't mean women. I also mean how men look at space, how masculinity, femininity. How do you look at power and how do you claim that space? When I say claim that space, I don't mean an individual. For example, when Raghu sir and Raki, when they were speaking about, training opportunities, learning opportunities, coming from that field, one thing I felt is the aspect of being. One thing I used to tell my team members is, if you're a mother, don't separate it. The way you approach your child, the way you negotiate with your mother-in-law, bring that in. They are not two separate beings. And a good mother and a wonderful mother will also succeed at work. And so this was something which is very problematic, because in the corporate structure, it was seen as, I was told that, you should not talk to pregnant women like that. I said, no, when a pregnant woman has a lot of energy. Okay, and after birth, a woman is very energetic. You go and look in villages where women go and do a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So, and that was the challenge. I was not able to communicate to many people, but I would say, listen, I'll prove it to you. And that woman will come and tell you how she's able to manage. Now, what I'm saying really here is power where you really distribute it. Power not in terms of a positional, designation wise. Okay, it's like a pecking order. I had a huge challenge with that. And as a woman, where you have to assert and also bring in a philosophical way of looking at it, while also, talking about these strong arguments and influencing. And that's what I had a problem even even when I want to go and work in Indian organizations. This is the problem I had, because they've all become westernized. They want to do their own stuff, but they are so, they've taken the worst from both. They've not looked at possibly what Ratan Tata did. So how do you really claim space for power? Not as an individual, but someone as a philosophical person, someone who can really influence. What are some ways in which you can do it? Sorry, I spoke a lot, but...
No, great question. Great question. This is the question that I've been working with for the last 50 years. Okay. Because, and I'm very happy with COVID, because hierarchical organizations, positional power organizations will crumble. They will not be able to handle fast change. They were designed for slow change contexts. They were designed when both technology and customers didn't shift very fast. So they're intrinsically dinosaurs which are not designed for responsiveness. They're designed for obedience. Okay. I don't think organizations that are hierarchical and don't really understand agility and responsiveness will be able to survive when change becomes very fast. And when change becomes very fast, you have to go into other forms of organization, which are, see, the problem is most people think in terms of either hierarchy and control or a rabble. Okay. Do you read Asterix? If you have to be an OD, you have to read Asterix.
Yes, I've read during school days.
No. It's Asterix, Panchatantra, and all are very important texts for OD. Yeah. So in Asterix, they show clearly the Roman army, which is highly structured, and the French Gaul army, which is a rabble. Most people think this way about organizations. If it's not highly structured and controlled, it'll become a rabble. That's not true. Because that says that adult human beings and organizations are irresponsible, which is not true at all. Right? So there are other ways of organizing where you respect people's responsibility. You respect the fact that they're in an organization because they want that organization to win. Now, if you design structures where people don't intrinsically feel they're part of a winning team, then as an OD person, you have to go there and do gimmicks called motivating people. Right? Nobody will work in an organization where they don't feel autonomy and they don't think it's a winning organization. The only way they'll work with it is because of some other constraints. They will not work with it with their heart. Okay? And wherever you go, organizations that allow this space are organizations that keep moving and keep progressing and keep growing. Organizations that don't give this respect and space to people will not grow. Yeah, I don't entirely agree with your binary, because a lot of organizations I see look hierarchical from the outside, but they have a lot of ways in which they bring in humanness into them, right? But of late, this whole thing of build to flip and all that is being talked about. But across the world, 80% of all organizations in the world are family-owned organizations. Yeah. So there are lots of stuff in this that you have to look at, but I really don't think hierarchical, non-empowering organizations can exist in a fast-changing context. And power has to be re-understood. All of you are using the word power in terms of centralized authoritarianism. That is not power. That is authority and referred power. It's not real power. Any organization that crushes real power will die, because entrepreneurship is real power. Commitment from the inside to go and do something. Leadership is not a position in an organization. Unfortunately, we've been using these words as though they're synonyms. No? So you're on the right line. Hopefully this is your dream. So go and change the world. What's your doubt? Yeah, you'll have to fight. Yeah, so go and fight. You have a choice, Sai. You either accept a status quo that you don't respect, or you go and try and create something that you respect for yourself. What would you like to do? When you turn around after 10 years or 15 years, would you like to say, I fought a damn good fight and I'm feeling very good about it? Or would you like to say, I wanted to fight, but I never did?
No, I had a good fight that I will continue to do so.
That's
But
it.
I think, yeah, I have done that. But I think it's not about what I have done, but it's more about, I've also had multiple failures also. It's not only about fighting
Good.
and winning. It's also
Good.
about having a sense of perspective. Okay, and from that point of view, you also need certain skills to do it. It's not just about doing it in ABC ways.
Sure.
And then when you lay claim for space, how do you do that? Like, when Satish raised the question on fantasy, that's one aspect, which is more on the artistic, philosophical.
You be
individual.
strategic. You be strategic. The problem with some of us is we think strategy is manipulation. It's not. Sahadeva was a great strategist. He was not a Shakuni. So strategy is not being Shakuni. Strategy is being Sahadeva. So if you have to win a battle, first you have to know that you're fighting an honorable battle. That gives you a sense of honor, really, right? The second is you have to be able to wield a sword, sure. But if you don't feel that you're fighting the right battle from within, so what if you're a great swordsman? Most organizations, most organizations are teaching people how to be fancy swordsmen who don't have a heart.
The only piece I will add here is going back to, again, I think the initial discussions where I think every time we seek validation, I think that's where it kind of comes and stops, right? We have the right ideas and we have the energy and the passion and whatever else, but somewhere we always go back to seek validation, and then, it kind of depends on how strong we are to kind of keep pursuing it. Like Sridhar was saying, there would be calls to his wife, but he was very clear that if the call is coming, then maybe he's doing the right thing, probably, right? So again, an example. 2 months ago, there was this she's not a friend at that point in time, but now I know her very well. A lady who started a not-for-profit organization called Aspire for her. This is for girls in the age group of 18 to 25. And the focus for this organization is to look at girls in this age group who, look at intentional careers, right? Otherwise, usually, okay, fine, let me study, then I'll get into a job and let me see where it leads me. That's the kind of a mindset. I'm generalizing, but majority get into a mindset of that sort. So career intentionality is a big thing. And the second is financial independence. You have to ensure that you're financially independent. So with that, she started. She started it in March 8th, Women's Day, she launched it. And then COVID hit. You can imagine, anybody else would say, okay, I don't know where it will go. In the 2 months, and who's her team? She is a 25-year-old experienced person. She's, an ex-banker. Her team are children, I call them children, in the age group of 18 to 25. My daughter is one of the team members. She joined in as an ambassador because they had an ambassador program. But the idea was that if you want to target this population and do something for them, then they are the best people to have in your team because they know the right things. And she heavily depended on them for strategy, for ideas, creativity, and what works and what doesn't work. She was there to kind of guide, and she continues to be there to guide and lead. but every idea comes from there, and she has empowered each of these kids to kind of go ahead and do their bit. So with the 7-8 member team, all who are just stepping into colleges or in colleges not yet graduated, she's utilized the COVID, situation, sitting at home. These girls across the globe have managed to turn around this platform into what you must go and see. They just, celebrated 1,000 members sign up on this platform, and they've done some awesome stuff already. So I think I would go back to, don't seek validation every now and then. If you're sure this is what you want, the rest of the world says whatever they have to say, you're sure, go for it. Take those small actions and move on. And of course, as you said, if you believe that, power has to be given to them and they will turn it around, you trust them and believe them, go ahead. The rest of the world will see when the outcomes are delivered.
Thanks, Neeraja. You just talked about an organization that is neither a rabble nor a hierarchy.
Right.
Yeah, it gives a platform, it supports, and it trusts people to say, go ahead, do the right thing. If you fail, that's fine. Only these organizations will survive, yeah, in a fast-changing context.
Raghu, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm currently in a situation, I'm currently handling a role where it is a very, very strict hierarchical organization. And all the heads who are there have been in power for more than 30 years from the government, of course. And we are seeing that because of that, as you were telling, we are finding hugely difficult to progress. And the next set of people, their potential is completely lost. So we are trying different things to bring them up. But every time we bring them up, again, this comes and shuts them off because they have to get the approval of the boss to do it. And the boss that does not believe in participatory working. So this starts right from the top. So and the thing is they're not willing to talk about this openly at all. In meetings they accept, but then they go back to the old ways of doing it, and then that's how it is going on. So I mean, any suggestions as how we should take this up?
Not on this, not on this thing like this, yeah. Yeah, this kind of thing you're talking about. See, I've worked with government organizations where this kind of hierarchy, whatever, was very strict and so on and so forth. It's taken a lot of work to get past it, and the people at the helm were willing to look at themselves and say, how am I a part of the problem? Now, if you don't have a top management group that looks at an issue and is not willing to say, how am I part of the problem? It's very difficult to bring in changes. Right? Now, like Sai was saying and whatever, most organizations believe that if I'm in a leadership position, regardless of whether I'm a leader or not really, I'm part of the solution and everybody else is part of the problem. Okay, so they always tell, okay, come train them to do this, train them to do that. Yeah, it will not work. Okay, so all the OD work I've done where I've succeeded, the first thing that I do is to tell the top management, this is where you're part of the problem. If they're not willing to listen, I don't proceed. Because structural changes, all these are cosmetic.
Got it.
Yeah. And you look at any organization that survived for a long period of time. All of them would have the ability when problems hit them to sit back and say, where are we going wrong? How are we part of the problem? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Satish.
Sure.
We still have about 10 minutes left.
There's one
Anybody
question
else?
from Saroja. I just saw it flash on my screen and it went off.
Hi, Saroja. Can you go ahead and ask the question, please?
Yes, I just feel, following all these discussions that the entire being in the industry myself for 20 years, seeing my colleagues and the mindset, doesn't this hierarchical mindset, even if you give, sometimes when I give the team the freedom to think for themselves, they come back saying, what do you think, right? The validation that Neerja spoke about, it is about if you get 90 marks, if you don't get, so it's a constant validation with which we have grown up for years, and the constant validation in our education, in our parents. So for instance, I always had this question, maybe Raghu may not like this question, is why Yudhishthira is called Dharamraj when he gambled his wife and brothers away. Why we should call him a Dharamraj? And that
You're
was
making a mistake, Saroja.
I mean, in my father-in-law and all, we have this
No,
argument.
that's, yeah, we'll have a talk. We'll have another separate chat about it.
So isn't this hierarchical? Shouldn't
Yes,
this
it is.
education and the home itself giving the children the right to ask, and the students in the schools can question if something is going wrong in the education system?
Sure. So all that I'm saying is these kind of hierarchical organizations with this kind of an attitude will not have the energy to deal with change. And what is coming, what is around the corner is very fast changing contexts. So quite soon they're going to get dismantled on their own. And organizations, exactly what Neerja described, yeah, where you need wisdom. You don't need control. You need trust. You need to create a context where these people can make mistakes. Now, if I have been trained in a certain way for the last 15, 20 years, where every time I took an initiative and I made a mistake, I was punished. You don't expect this person to turn over on a pivot and suddenly become somebody else. You need to help this person to make that shift. But I believe, and I've seen this, not that I believe, that when you really give that person this trust and you nurture it and you work with it, people come up with amazing capabilities. Yes, there are limitations. So when you recognize the limitation, you deal with them differently. Yeah.
Saroja, again, sorry, Raghu, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, just carry on. Yeah, that's all. That's what
I was going to say, something just popped up into reflections and reminders from my past life, right? So I grew up, and I think in the first session, for those of you who were there in the first session or second session, I said I grew up in a very conservative family, an only child, very meek, timid. That's the way I was brought up, and I continued to be like that for the first 10 years in my career. I was a programmer, and that kind of, so the personality kind of worked well with that role at that point in time, because I would be given a design, I would program, test it, and give it back, go home. What happened in that 10th year when something changed was I was asked to lead a team. And in those years, there was no great definition of leadership. If you were the most technically qualified, you became the lead. That's how they used to identify the lead for the team. So it was a 10-member team. All of them were my peers, but I probably was the most technically qualified. They made me the team leader. And it was at a time when we were going through a lot of transformation. Work was getting transitioned from on-site to off-site. We were going in for a CMMI level certification. And there was enough and more that had to be taken care of. The CMMI level certification, let me take that as an example. So every week we were supposed to do a self-assessment of whether we are following the processes that were defined for us to become compliant with it. So in a year's time, there was going to be an external audit, and we had to hopefully get certified. So weekly, every team had to do it. Self-compliance and what is the percentage. So I did it the first week, and I being, I will follow the book as it mandates, right? I got a pathetic score for my self-compliance. I took that number and I went to this meeting of all team leads, which was chaired by the MD. So this was a big project for them. And everybody was giving out their numbers. Mine was the least. And everybody else had good numbers. And I used to run a team, it's a production support team. So if those of you who don't understand, it's basically IT systems. You have to support them. So, you get a call to say this is not working and you kind of troubleshoot. And if it needs a code fix, you give it to somebody else. Otherwise, you kind of, tell the customer, this is what needs to be done. And I asked another production support team what was their score, and they had a great score. I was wondering, how is it that they're getting it? Like, for example, there was a question which said, do you have coding standards? Which means when you program it, you should follow certain standards. And the answer was yes or no. Now, I don't have coding standards because we don't program. But so I can't say a yes. So I said a no. Okay. I asked this guy, what did you do? How did you answer it? He said, I said yes. And I created a coding standards document and put it there. So, I'm compliant. That's how I got my score. Now, I said, I'm not going to do this. So in that meeting, this girl who was so meek and timid, but because I kind of stood for the right things, I told the MD, I'm finding it difficult to follow the processes. It would be good if you can send somebody from the QA team to sit with our team to understand the work that we do and then advise us on how we can actually follow these processes. Everybody looked at me as if, I'd gone nuts. And I said, she, if not thrown out of the organization, for sure thrown out of this role. You're just supposed to, you can't be asking questions. And this girl who doesn't talk is asking this to the MD. You know what happened the next day? The MD announced. He said, we are announcing a concept of quality representatives through the organization, where people from the QA team will come and sit with every team to see the work that they are doing and then to advise them on how to follow these processes. And they came, the QR came, the quality representative sat with the team and they said, I think our process document is at fault because it caters only to development projects. It is not catering to the production support projects. And they went and revamped the entire process literature. So the point is that, yes, I have also been brought up like that, but something told me that I have to speak because I wanted to speak for the right things and for the team. And people do take notice. There are good leaders. There are people who kind of listen to you. What's the worst that can happen? Maybe I would have been thrown out. But then this was something that they institutionalized throughout the organization, and some big change came through that. Otherwise, maybe would have fallen flat towards the end of the review period. So agree that it's also got to do with the parenting and the schooling. But if you see an opportunity to give that power to empower the girl, the boy, whoever there is, please do give that opportunity and trust and say that I will support you.
I agree, Neerja.
Can I make a slight shift, Neerja, into what you're saying?
Right.
You played a leadership role in that meeting.
Right.
This is what I call leadership, because you're saying something is wrong with the system and the system needs to be changed. Yeah, your MD did not play a leadership role. He played a support role for the leadership step that you took.
Right.
I think people have to recognize what is leadership and what is authority. You took a leadership step and he used his authority to support it.
Very true.
I think it's extremely important to understand these shifts, because otherwise we keep using the word leader in a very wrong way and get into muddles. Yeah?
Thank you.
Sorry, Saroja.
No, not at all, Raghu. I agree. I think leadership is not a designation or a role. It can be anyone. At home, your child could be a leader, or your maid servant could come up with an idea and be a leader. It could be anyone. Not a problem. It was more that rather than each manager trying to do it, if we could have done it at a much larger level, instead of the rest of the team looking at Neerja like how she could tell it, if everyone had thought that, oh, why didn't I come up with this idea first? That's what I was getting at. Why should anyone be afraid to come up with a good idea? That was what I was questioning. Not why not supporting or something like that.
No, you have to create that context, no?
Correct.
For people to come up and take the chances, if it's a risk, that's fine.
We do. Still, it is a struggle, Raghu. There are people who are still timid, and I'm surprised that people 20 years younger to me still go through that struggle. They do share. Their parents have said, don't open your mouth. Maybe I was brought up in a way where I could express my views, but I still come across children and schooling systems. Similarly, if you don't like sciences, you are considered a failure even now in 2000, which is sad, which is what I was getting at.
Some of this has to be worked with.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it.
There is something called psychological safety, is a term that we use.
Correct.
Absolutely. Thanks. We have about 2 minutes left as per my clock. Any last question, quick question that we can speak about?
Yeah, this is Lakshmi here.
Yeah, Lakshmi, please.
I have a question. Raghu and Neeraja, in your experience, how do you see leadership today on seeing people beyond gender? Has it evolved? What has been your experience on this? If you could share some insights, it will be helpful. Thank you.
Raghu, you want to take that first?
No, it's too generic a question. You can't generalize at all, yeah.
Okay.
Because I've met all kinds of leaders. I've actually seen more leaders who are supportive, so-called feminine, who succeed much more than the so-called masculine guys.
Okay. Either
Yeah.
ways I meant, yeah.
Pardon?
Either ways, like not specific to feminine, either ways.
No, I'm saying very specifically.
Okay.
There are a lot of women who go up to so-called leadership positions and try and display very masculine ways of managing. But I have not seen organizations succeed through that kind of thing. There has to be a balance. And wherever there's a balance between nourishment and all of that, along with courage, let's say, if you want to call it a masculine thing, they succeed. Right? The example that Neeraja gave was of a leader who was willing to listen to somebody and nourish or foster that particular kind of thinking.
Yeah, okay.
That's it from me, Neeraja.
Sure. Yeah.
Neeraja, you want to say something?
No, I think I agree with Raghu to say that it's time to stop talking about women leaders, men leaders, as we already have through the 3 weeks understood that there are traits, leadership traits, which need, masculine and feminine qualities, which again, goes back to the 5 archetypal energies that we have been talking about. So if we go beyond that and say, okay, fine, why is this leader successful, whether it was a man or a woman, we probably will be able to realize that these are the aspects which propelled him or her to be successful. And for each of us here who wants to kind of grow in life, I won't only say career, in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We need to kind of ensure that we do the right things by understanding what is required at what point in time, and not because a man did or a woman did. So let's go beyond the gender.
Thanks. I just saw another question pop up, and probably keep it the last question. Sonal, you had a question. I just saw it on chat. If you can ask the question then.
Thanks, Vivek. Yeah, so actually I was thinking, as Neeraja said, that the leadership is not the authority. It's something, I mean, you can, if you are with it, then you can just go for it. So, I mean, to add to it, I'm just asking that, do you think that leadership also comes with the sense of ownership? Whatever task is given to me, and if I own it up, I said that, okay, this is my responsibility, I should do it. then automatically you get that leadership. Then you think that way. You think that I need to, if I change the process or if I do it differently, then I think I can better achieve it, correctly. So what do you say?
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I was talking about earlier. Now, see, there are 2 or 3 levels of ownership. I was talking to Sai about it, around it. There is something called psychological ownership of a task. That's what you're talking about. People talk about it as, ownership, whatever. It's a psychological thing. And the reason why I'm saying it is there is structural ownership. That is authority. There is psychological ownership. So I am being given a task, I own it up.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced of something. True leadership, shifting things and all that will happen when this psychological ownership is high and it is given space. Organizations that don't give space to this kind of psychological ownership, don't foster it, will become weak, because human energy comes from here. Human energy comes from psychological ownership. It does not come from designation. So what you're saying is right. That is the first step for leadership. That's what we're saying. Will is more important than skill.
Correct.
And in some ways to kind of, take ownership as well as to ensure that the team takes ownership. I always say, show the bigger picture. Many people, say, okay, if I need to fill this Excel sheet, just go get this data and, fill it. Nobody is going to take ownership. It's going to be, okay, I have to get some data as the most monotonous task in the world. They will do some crap job and give it away. But if I was asked, I would say, okay, what is the purpose of this Excel sheet? And it becomes, part of a larger thing. It is going to trigger some other decision making. I think I will review it and say, I think it needs to have a few more columns, or, I think it should get data from this format or from this source. So I, as a person, can display, take more ownership when I get to know the larger picture. And somebody who manages and leads the team can also show a larger picture. So to Saroja, maybe that's one of the ways to get your team to say, okay, fine, now I understand the bigger picture. Let me go a little beyond what I've been asked to do, become creative, and take more ownership and do things without expecting the validation. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah. Thank you, Neerja. Thanks, Raghu.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we are 5 minutes past schedule close. So before I wind up, any closing thoughts, comments, Neerja, Raghu?
Way past my dinner time.
I would say, these formats are very compelling. Vivek, I've been telling you from day one, the breakout room format was so compelling. Today was even more, I think. Here is giving that particular ownership to the people, right? We are the gurus here and we will tell you things. We're giving ownership to the audience to ask and to respond and to kind of reflect. And hopefully it will have triggered some thought processes which will get them to act a little differently if things have not been going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Vivek,
platform.
Thanks. Yes, Ashok. Yeah.
Vivek, I want to thank Mr. Raghu by saying that, see, hierarchy, I am from Himalaya Drug Company. It is a 90 years old company actually. Earlier we were working on the hierarchical structure actually. Everything has to be routed, everything has to be approval. Yes, now also it is available actually. But I am there is the company with almost 25 years. But the hierarchical, when they were looking for that, the growth rate was very nominal actually, very nominal. After that, now the company is growing in a rate of growth is very tremendous actually. But we are not going under, even I can meet the managing director, I can express my ideas and views. He takes into that. But it is not like implementation immediately. They will route through somebody, check, finance, CFO will check whether what I'm saying is right or wrong, what is that?
Correct.
It's going, we are enjoying to work in that. They trust the people actually, they trust the people. 60 days I'm working from home, Not even a single director is called, Ashok, what you are doing on a daily activities. But
Perfect.
we are updating onto that. What is the day today? How many crores planning I have completed? There is a problem in the marketing. Actually, there is a problem in the entire modern trade is not opened. How much we are doing a business every day? We are discussing. At the end of the day, the management was so happy that even into during this the challenging period, everybody is doing, because we are trust. The people that trust. Even the
Absolutely.
CFO says that, don't worry, I am with you people. Don't worry that. He may doing a less sales, but we'll make it in the coming month. We'll make it in the this thing. That is one of the best thing. I go with Mr. Raghu that it has to be like a trust. We should have a trust, and we should go about that. That is one of the best thing in the 25 years. What I learned, I am experiencing that. That's why I wanted to tell you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashok. Thanks. Raghu, anything else besides your dinner? I know you
will more than skill, trust. Yeah, these are all simple old ways of doing business. We should go back to that. And more than anything, we have to trust that as Indians, we know what to do. We are taking over so many companies in the world, whatever. There's no need to hang on to the colonial idea that somebody else knows better than us. Without being arrogant, we have to learn, sure, but trust that we know.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody. It's been lots of fun. It's been an absolute pleasure to bring this series of pre-webinars to all of y'all. And today has been a bit of a revelation because we experimented a little bit with a different kind of a structure. We had a great time, and I think the point that Neerja made, where the ownership was with the audience, and they could pretty much ask the questions and look at which direction they'd love to go, was fascinating. Absolute pleasure, like I said, to bring this out to you. Watch this space. We will be announcing our next set of contemplative conversations shortly. And and we hope to take this forward. And we will be in touch with all of you and continue to engage with you in multiple forms. We're happy to let you know that we're launching the 5 Seats of Power. It's a program which is based on the assessment that you must have taken online. So we are going to be launching the program shortly. We are working out the dates and all of that. So I will be in touch with all the people who've registered, and we'll reach out to you with mailers, and quite happy to engage in a conversation if you need more clarification and details, kind of thing, right? So thank you so much. Thanks again. Thanks Neerja. Thanks Raghu. Thanks Sridhar. Thanks Satish. Thanks everybody for being part of it. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.